All right, so I want every enthusiastic applause for each individual that's about to come out. First one, she plays Sister Minnie. Ladies and gentlemen, Jillian Dion. Came out with a fly bag and everything. Look at that. Ready for Hollywood. Plays Sister Rita. Ladies and gentlemen, JaNae Collins. You might have heard about this next up-and-comer. He was in movies like Terms of Endearment. He was Trinity in the season of Dexter, and I'm still mad at him for that. But we love him so. He plays the lead prosecutor, Peter. Ladies and gentlemen, the legend, Academy Award nominee, John Lithgow. Let's keep the legends coming out. Plays Molly's mother, Lizzie. Big voice in this film, does so much with so little words. Physical performance, ladies and gentlemen, Tantu Cardinal. All right, and we're gonna get a little rowdy for the next person, Molly Burkhart. She is the winner of the Golden Globe this year, nominated at the Screen Actors Guild Award. If you're like me, you knew the band before the band got famous. She was in Certain Women, and she's amazing in that. If you can go see that, do yourself a favor, ladies and gentlemen, Lily Gladstone. All right, that's it. All right, thanks, guys. All right, let me start with you, Lily. You had the daunting task of starring in a Martin Scorsese movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm so sorry that you've done some really bad things in your career that has warranted this now, but it is a remarkable performance that you give. Physical, so much history in it. Can you talk about just your approach to telling Molly's story and then telling it with respect and honor?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was the approach. It was a little fateful, I guess, that when I got offered the role, because there was a weight in the whole audition process, a weight to the idea that it might happen. That it's kind of just one step at a time. So when the offer came in, there was definitely excitement. There was a certain level of dread with it too, because it's a big thing. But the fact that it happened and the offer had come in on December 1st by Nobody's Design, which is Molly Burkhart's birthday, it felt like maybe there was a responsibility that was, not really up to me, but was important that I receive. So because it happened that way, it was like an immediate connection to the person that I was playing. And because there really is nobody living today who knew her, there's not video footage, there's not, a lot that I could really study about her specifically, other than what was in photographs and in court records. It was important that she be shaped by what the community said about who she was and her legacy, and a lot of what people did know and remember and feel and inherit and pass forward from that generation. So there was kind of a basis of comparison in knowing just about my great-grandma Lily. She was born before, or she passed away before I was born, but she was such a fixture in my dad's life and was such a fixture in the home life with just stories about who she was. And there were some similarities I saw there with her and Molly. You know, living around the same time in history. They were born within 10 years of each other. Saw this great transition happen, had families. Both were pretty devoutly Catholic, so that kind of interesting little cocktail in worldview. There were a lot of things that I had that were kind of assumptions I could make based upon my own family history, but it's also, you know, one of my first times spending a whole lot of time in Oklahoma. It's a very different history for natives there. Osage at that point in history had not that long ago been, you know, relocated, had gone through that unimaginable collective leaving of home, having to leave your ancestral lands and go to this new place. And so that was still very much in the collective conscious, you know. That was just a generation removed from Molly and her sisters. They were all the first generation that were born in this new place. So there was a lot of, there was an awareness that what I could apply would just be more how I would apply being with community. And I just knew that I needed to treat and approach Molly the way that I would hope another actress would approach a biopic that would feature my grandma Lily. Because there's a real legacy there, and you know, a lot of it came from meeting with her family and direct descendants. And then, yeah, there was also this element of shaping a presence for her on screen that harkened to a lot of the references Marty wanted to make of films that, you know, where this film would kind of fit, saddled in, you know, films of the 40s, 50s, Montgomery Clift, and most specifically the Olivia de Havilland Montgomery Clift film, The Heiress. So it was kind of reconstructing this leading lady from that period of time in cinema, but from a more indigenous perspective. Because Olivia de Havilland in that film, you know, she's raised in a patriarchal, like oppressive household. Her father tells her from the get-go that she's going to be hard to marry off because she's so plain. She has a very diminished sense of self. So it's like, that doesn't apply to Molly. Molly's an Osage woman. Osage women own everything. They're the ones who have the last say over what happens with all capital in the house, all material. Really, indigenous women, period, across the board, were like backbones of our families, of our societies, of our communities. So it was kind of a reimagining of, okay, what would that golden age leading lady look like? And I'm so grateful that we had so many characters to kind of flush out this entire family and show a lot of different aspects of how women were embracing these changes during the time. So yeah, it was kind of a balancing of a number of different inspirations.
Thank you. Tantu, Miss Cardinal, goddess, I don't know how we refer to you these days. While I love your performance so much, what I think we get from it, because your character sets up what I call one of the startling moments of the movie, and it's when Molly sees an owl, and it's because of what you deliver in those early scenes. Can you talk about your approach to telling the story about a mother that just wants the best for her family and daughters?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, yes. Yes.
What are you saying? Sorry.
That's good. Can you talk about the approach of your approach to telling the story of your character, Lizzie, and in particular when it comes to the story of the owl that Molly sees at one point in the movie? It's what you deliver that gets us invested in really feeling like Molly's in danger.
You may be able to understand us well out there, but it's very hard for
I
us to
can't
understand.
understand what you're telling me.
We're having the same problem. We don't have any monitor.
Oh, sorry. Can you just talk about the approach to your character, telling your character's story?
The approach to my character story
Yes.
is kind of my history. I come from that world where people have been seriously ripped off. I come from that world where women's lives are in danger. I come from the world of genocide, colonialism, femicide. It's in my blood. It's in my bones. It's in my world. So that was my preparation. And I also come from the world where languages disappear right in front of your eyes. But I had the great good fortune of being raised by my grandmother. And I was raised with a number of languages in my head all the time when I was a child. I also came from an isolated community. And so the outside world was kind of a fuzz on the background in my formative years. So a lot of my knowing is intuitive. So, and there's a deep loneliness in not having my language, not hearing my language, and knowing people I grew up with not having any language because it was that close. My generation and the way I was raised, I saw 100 years ago. But my brother, 6 years younger than me, he has very little of the language. It was that fast and that quick. So the preparation then for me was to translate all of that forest into that Osage place, which was not difficult because I have great compassion and heart for our history and who we are and what we have gone through, what we have survived. So I had the good fortune of spending my time with the keepers of the language, the resuscitators of the language. And I also came through a time where the laws to protect our relationship with creative force, our relationship with God, our practices in church. I come in my time is when I was a child, I could only go in the dark with my grandmother when she wanted to go and see some healers. And I had to swear to secrecy and silence. And then in my adult years, I witnessed those laws being changed by people in our community, by our warriors in our community that have gotten their education. They got the language of the government and the laws, and they traversed that territory. So now it's okay to carry a pipe. Now it's okay to have those articles of communication. But it was against the law. That's what it meant that those pipes were buried at the beginning of this. That meant now the government and business and church are the boss. That's what that meant. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. I will speak to you. I think maybe it's getting lost in the microphones over there and the speakers over there. Mr. Lithgow, loved everything you've worked on my entire life. You're kind of been the pinnacle of acting for so many people. And in this film, what I love is that when you come in, you're a breath of fresh air, and your character, Peter, speaks to the importance of allyship and how we need everyone to come together to fight injustices. What did you learn about Peter, and what did you do research about the prosecutor that tried to bringing some justice?
Well, I just think the entire experience educated me and opened my mind a lot. I had heard something about the extraordinary story of the victimization of the Osagenation, but I had not read David Grant's book. I knew Marty was out there in Oklahoma making this epic movie with Leo and De Niro. But it came as a total surprise. Ellen Lewis, who did an incredible job casting this film, a shout out to her. It's no miracle that the ensemble is nominated for so many awards, because that's very much her co-creation with Marty. But she invited me in with only about a month to go in a long shooting period. So I came in for the last couple of weeks. Everybody else was so exhausted. They'd been living in Bartlesville, Oklahoma in a hotel for 6 or 7 months. And I was, a breath of fresh air is a nice way to describe me. And it certainly was that for me. I was working with just remarkable people. I waited my whole career to work with Marty and Leo and Bob. But what just filled me with pride, and I felt was a great honor, was to be brought into this particular piece of storytelling and to work with people like this. Sadly, I was only working with Leo. Leo, with Lily, because she was in the audience for the courtroom. Everybody else had passed away by then. That's right. And even Lily, I barely got to know her because I was up there with Leo and Louis Cancelmi and Brendan and Jesse, all the white guys, basically. I was the newcomer and the kind of outsider, being the prosecutor, being the man who's trying to bring justice to this astoundingly unjust story. It made me an outsider, and I felt that way in many ways. It was a beautiful role because it was sanity arriving, and very close to the end. It was the man who was bringing justice, and it's, as I say, it just filled me with pride to have been chosen to play that part, and with Brendan as my opposite number. Nobody knew he was about to become an Oscar winner. For all of us in the cast, our stock bumped up when he won the Oscar for it. So he and I were playing two tiny roles, but we felt very special when it opened.
Thank you. JaNae and Jillian, one of my favorite parts of the film, in a film that's about tragedy and about injustice, one of my favorite scenes is the sisters just being sisters and sitting and looking at people interact. And as I grew up with 4 older sisters, so that scene spoke a lot to me because I watched them all make fun of other people as we sat there. Can you talk about the family building dynamic that you wanted to portray of this sisterhood, this womanhood that existed and that was torn apart?
Well, it's an interesting story with that because all 4 of us grew up as only children for the most part. So understanding the dynamic of the sisters was a process for us. You know, we watched other sisters in the Osage community because they have a very particular birth order and kind of like personalities that emerge with the birth order. So it was interesting seeing that in the community and taking that step back 100 years to portray it as it would have been.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah, we all hung out and got to know each other. And as John mentioned, the casting was just phenomenal. Like, we all took photos next to each other and we're like, okay, well, we all look very similar and we're from different parts of the country and Canada and whatever else. But yeah, we just started to hang out and realized there was like a really fluid dynamic between, I think, the four of us, and it was just really, it felt like home already when I was like with these women, and it just felt natural, and I think that conveyed in the film, just because there was such a fluidity and such a natural love, like, for everybody that we worked with and alongside, so I think that was a big part of it.
In that scene in particular as well, we had reworked that scene, just the four of us, and we were kind of trying to make it more believable in the sense of like, what would we say, you know, because we tease a lot, we're natives. And implementing that in was such a beautiful thing, because you got to see the dynamic of the sisters, but you've also got to see a little of our humor and how we like poke and prod each other, especially the older sisters, you know, in the sense of how the birth order went. But it really helped understanding, like, you know, each other. We spent an extensive amount of time before we even started filming with each other. We all lived very close to each other in the houses before we started filming, and it was amazing getting to know these phenomenal ladies.
Thank you. Feel free. This is a question to anyone that wants to take it. Huge shout out here to production designer Jack Fisk, who built a town that puts you into this era. Jacqueline, who did the costumes, and Rodrigo Prieto, who shot this movie beautifully. It really puts the audience into the moment. How did you feel seeing this era brought to life there in front of you? Did that only help your development of your characters, or did it even bring some somber to seeing like there was this once beautiful, enriching place that gets destroyed because of greed and other factors?
It really was amazing how they created a world. And at the very heart of that was the fact that we were in Pawhuska, and we were in, we were in that community, and we had this feeling of being welcomed in, and this gratitude that our story is being told. We were not actually in the courthouse where that courtroom took place, but we were only blocks away. My character's name was Leeward, which was a combination of Leahy and Seaward, two prosecutors that worked the case. They just conflated the two. But one block away from where we were doing those scenes was Leahy Street, named for this very man. And we just felt, I can only speak for myself as the newcomer at the very end of the shooting period, but I felt that we were just completely entering into that world, and Marty was just exhaustive in getting everything right. He was so determined. I think it's because he respected the story so deeply. He wanted to do justice to it. Probably more, of course that's the case of everything he does, but I think probably more in the case of this film than anything else. He just created our world.
Anybody else?
I think that was a big part of it as well. Like, the Osage women dressed us. They dressed us in broadcloth. We were welcomed in to their yearly ceremony and introduced to their culture, like submerged in it. So you couldn't help but feel a part of it, especially as like Indigenous women in general. Just being part of that story touches pretty close to home for us, because we all know somebody that's been murdered or missing, whether it be a friend, family friend, relative. So I think that was super important, and just being in the actual environment that it all happened, it really kind of just, it seeped in, and it was incredibly powerful to be in that situation and around those people, because they were so loving, and as you said, like, they were so thankful that we were telling a story that needed to be told and is now on a global scale. And it's not an uncommon story is the thing, is like, it's not uncommon at all, and the fact that it's now being brought into light is such a monumental moment for us Indigenous people. Yeah.
Lily, my question for you. One thing I love about the movie, shows how not everything is black and white, like hatred and murder is black and white, but also one of the things that is surprising to the audience and very complicated is what I think, and maybe anyone else can raise their hand if they agree, that Ernest really loved Molly, and I think that is something that becomes almost like a plot twist in the story, even though he never admitted it in real life. Can you talk about that complicated relationship and showing that obviously Molly loved him, but he might have actually loved her and just got caught up in this?
Yeah, that had come from, I believe, Marty's first meeting with Grey Horse as a community. There were 250 people from Grey Horse who showed up to this dinner to speak about just some of their concerns with the film. And it was Margie Burkhart, Molly's granddaughter, who pressed that point, like, you have to remember in telling this that Ernest and Molly were in love, they loved each other. And there was a while there where, you know, you can say that, but then how do you etch it out for a film? How do you find what the little, you know, what the chemistry would be? A lot of it came from kind of the evidence of what we were hearing about how their children were. Both Cowboy and Lizzie were known for being very fun-loving, hosting people, having parties a lot, very close to each other. We kind of found maybe Ernest and Molly dynamic in the way that their parents' personalities may have shaped who they were. How Cowboy would like getting a rise out of Lizzie, and Lizzie would just, oh, Cowboy. So we figured there was probably that dynamic there a bit. And early on, we had shot it a number of ways because we weren't really sure how we were going to solve what was actually happening behind closed doors. Because there's also, you know, people have a different face when they're out of their homes. So what was happening in this marriage where nobody could see. But some of the scenes we were improvising 5 or 6 different ways, or not improvising, just altering what was on the page with different levels of like suspicion on Molly's part, of complicity on Ernest's part, of love on both parts. Because there was a mutual benefit, and a lot of people don't pick it up maybe on the first watch if you're unfamiliar with the history, but the whole idea that Osage, and this was policy in the US for Native people across the board, were incompetent or were wards or just incapable of handling their own finances and would have to have somebody appointed to do so, or have to like go report to somebody to get access to any money that they would have. And with Osage, that system was called the guardianship program specifically. First time we see Molly, she's asking for money from her guardian for you know, a feed. It's like, yeah, my mother did need that much meat. It's like, I don't need to justify that. But, you know, still having to maintain composure and be nice because then you get your money. It was it was a benefit for Osage women and Osage people to be married to their guardian, because then you don't have to go and ask somebody else for permission. You just kind of tell, you know, and Ernest was malleable enough in her eyes, like, if he just wants money, he's gonna have fun, he's not gonna question how I wanna spend mine. So there was a mutual benefit there too. It wasn't just falling in love, it was enjoying each other, but seeing that, like, okay, we have something to gain from each other. But yeah, letting that kind of grow into a mutual thing on both parts. And you know, as we were improvising all of these different things, we were getting notes back from Thelma, because Thelma is in hand with Marty as the film is being made, even though she wasn't there in person. She was reviewing footage, and this was filmed, so it would take a few days for her to see the dailies and then report back. But by and large, she kept saying what's working is when the love is real, and we need more of that. So then it kept going that way. And you know, ultimately, that's where you kind of see this great betrayal, this grand analogy of colonization and indigenous people. It's like, by and large, people talk about when they come in from the outside how generous we are, you know, how embracing we are, and we are. That's like, you know, you say you like something, we give it to you. It's just kind of, it's protocol. And just seeing how that has just been so taken advantage of, so exploited, so overly exploited. That loving relationship between the two kind of served as a microcosm for the bigger conversation that was happening. And it did just, you know, Ernest insisted until the day he died, whether it was just a guilty conscience, aging, but he would also show up. Like, he moved back to the community after he got out of prison, and people knew his presence. He would still show up to things. It's kind of a ghost that haunted the place in some ways. And I mean, the biggest clue to me that there was love in the household that was true, that we had the responsibility of finding somehow, is that his son Cowboy, even after the trial, maintained a relationship with his dad. He gave him the nickname Dynamite. He would excuse himself from like being with people and say, I gotta go pick up old Dynamite now. But he still had a relationship with his dad until later on. I think there was a rift at some point, and Cowboy didn't go see him as much, but it just kind of shows you that there was something that kept that family together, that made those kids love being together, love having fun, gave them a certain relationship with each other.
Thank you. I would talk to these wonderful people. Please. I'd sit and hang out with you guys all day, but we ran out of time. Under your chairs is Robert De Niro goggles that you can bring home with you. I'm lying, I'm sorry. I want those really bad, and they won't give me some. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Killers of the Flower Moon.